Welcome to Ghosts of Asia, where superstition meets steel, where ancient spirits whisper through concrete walls, and where even the glow of city lights cannot chase away what lingers in the dark. Tonight, we descend into a story not of distant jungles or forgotten temples, but of modern glass towers and silent hallways. The places we trust, the spaces we live. But what if there was a floor that was never meant to be found? They say in Bangkok, some elevators skip the 13th floor out of fear. But sometimes they don't stop at 15 either. Sometimes the numbers flicker and 14 appears. And when it does, don't look. Don't breathe, and whatever you do, don't step out. Because once you do, you may never find your way back. This is the story of Pim, a woman who moved in alone, but wasn't alone for long. This is The Floor That Wasn't There. The first thing Pim noticed was how quiet everything was. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, no. The kind that felt like the building was holding its breath. Even on the 18th floor of her new high-rise in Bangkok, where glass-walled balconies overlooked the distant hum of Sukhumvit traffic, there was a stillness that clung to everything like mist, as if the air was too dense, too still, too alert. She dragged the last cardboard box into her apartment, kicked the door shut behind her, and exhaled. The sharp scent of new paint hit her nose, mingling with the faint citrus of floor polish. Everything looked modern: smart home lighting, fingerprint door locks, voice-activated curtains, even a concierge service tied to an app. Luxury living. Her realtor had called it urban serenity. She called it a fresh start. After everything with Crit, after the panic attacks, the deadlines, the sense that her life was unspooling in quiet, invisible ways, this apartment was supposed to be her reset button. A place where she could work alone, sleep alone, breathe alone. No more chaos, no more noise. But that first night, something felt wrong. It was the elevator. Not the way it looked, no, it was just like any other. Brushed steel doors, soft yellow lighting inside, a neat panel of numbered buttons. But late at night, around 2 a.m., it began to hum. Not loudly, not mechanically, just persistently. A faint droning sound, as if the elevator was moving on its own. She had just turned off the hallway light and curled into bed when she heard it. A soft ding. Then the deep thrum of cables, like the belly of a sleeping beast awakening. The elevator wasn't next to her unit. Hers was near the end of the hallway, but the sound echoed strangely through the building. She opened her eyes, waited. Nothing. Then again, ding. She sat up. Her phone lit up beside her, 2:17 a.m. Curious, she opened the building's custom concierge app. One of its features was a live feed of the elevators, something she found mildly invasive but intriguing. She tapped the feed for elevator A. The cabin was empty. Still, the numbers changed. Floor 7, 10, 13, and then 14. Her brow furrowed. That wasn't right. She backed out of the video and checked the building map again. Like most high-rises in Asia, this one skipped floor 13 entirely, superstition. So how could there be a 14? She stared at the screen. The number blinked, 14, 14, 14. The elevator had stopped there. but there was no 14. Then, the feed cut to black for a second. When it resumed, the elevator was moving again. Now it showed floor 18. She swallowed, glanced toward her front door. Nothing. Silence. She shook her head and laughed under her breath. Probably just a glitch, some tech hiccup. It was a new building, after all, over-engineered and under-tested. She turned the phone screen off and tried to sleep, but the humming sound, it lingered. The next day, Pim brushed it off. She had freelance work to finish, a storyboard pitch for a health tech company, bland and colorless, but decently paid. She set up her desk in the corner, opened her laptop, and drowned herself in design tasks. Occasionally, she looked out over the city. Bangkok shimmered under the heat. Temple spires and rooftop gardens, train tracks like veins cutting through concrete. That evening, she met a neighbor by the elevators, an older woman with dyed red hair and an awkward smile. "Hi," Pim said politely. "You're new, right? Just moved into 1807? Pim nodded. "Good floor," the woman murmured, then hesitated. "Just don't go poking around where you shouldn't." "Sorry?" The woman offered a weak smile. "Nothing. Just don't use the elevator too late, that's all." Before Pim could ask more, the woman stepped into the lift. The doors closed. Floor 8 lit up. Pim stood there for a long time. That night, she stayed up until 3 a.m., listening. And again, it happened. Ding! She turned on the app. Elevator A. Empty. Numbers rising. 13, and then again, 14. The camera glitched. She thought she saw something, a flicker of movement, a dark shape near the back corner of the cabin. She blinked, rewound, nothing. Her heart pounded anyway. The third night, she dreamed of footsteps. Not hers, not Crit's. Slower, heavier. She stood in the hallway in her dream, watching the elevator doors part slowly, revealing a corridor she had never seen before. Darker, with peeling paint and old wooden floorboards, not the gleaming marble tiles of her new home. And standing at the end of it was a child, small, motionless, facing the wall. She couldn't see its face. It didn't turn, just stood there. She tried to speak, but her voice didn't come. The lights flickered. The hallway seemed infinite. When she woke up, her nose was bleeding. A thin trail of red smeared across her pillow. Me, her black and white cat, sat upright at the edge of the bed, staring at the door. And from the hallway, she heard a faint, mechanical ding. That morning, she asked the front desk about floor 14. The receptionist, a young man with 2 white teeth, smiled too quickly. "There is no floor 14, miss." "But the elevator shows it sometimes." "It must be a display error. It skips from 13 to 15. It always has." "Then why does it stop between them?" He blinked. "It doesn't. I've seen it." He hesitated. "You're not the first to ask." She leaned forward. "Who else asked?" But his smile returned, polite and hollow. "Would you like us to run diagnostics on your left? I can file a ticket." "No," she muttered, stepping back. As she walked away, she glanced back once, and the receptionist was already looking down, typing something quickly. Not filing a report, just writing. And behind him, mounted on the wall, a small wooden spirit house. Inside it, the incense had burned down to ash, and the tiny mirror glued behind the Buddha statue was cracked. Pim didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat in bed, curtains drawn, eyes on the app feed, heart thunning in her throat. The elevator was idle for most of the evening, until 2:47 a.m. Ding! Movement. The camera flickered. No one inside. Then, the number changed. 14. And this time, she saw it clearly. A handprint on the glass of the elevator door. Fresh, slippery, as if someone had pressed their hand hard on the inside. The camera shook slightly, as if the feed itself was trembling. And from her hallway, a soft, scuffling sound. A pause. A second ding. She rose, every instinct screaming, "Don't open the door." But she walked forward anyway, barefoot, the floor cold beneath her. She peeked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but the elevator doors were open, and inside stood the same child from her dream, back turned, head bowed, arms hanging loosely by their side. Then, very slowly, they turned. But before she could see the face, the peephole went black. For the next 3 days, Pim avoided the elevator. She told herself it was nothing, a trick of the lights, maybe the camera glitching. She even joked about it in a text to her best friend from college, Noon. "My building's haunted by bad software." But the joke didn't land. Noon left her on scene. So Pim went back to her routine. Wake up late, make instant coffee, work from her corner desk until her neck ached, eat microwaved food, watch muted reruns of variety shows before bed. It was the familiar rhythm of a lonely freelancer, one she used to crave. Except now, every silence felt too aware. The building itself seemed to listen. At night, when the air conditioner clicked off, she could hear things, faint taps, like someone drumming their nails along the wall. Sometimes she heard the muffled sound of someone speaking Thai just outside her door. When she looked through the peephole, the corridor was always empty. One night, she left her phone recording while she slept. In the morning, she played it back. A few hours of static, then a click, her front door unlocking, and a voice, low, childlike, whispering something she couldn't quite understand. She deleted the file immediately. Pim started taking the stairs. It was exhausting climbing 18 floors, but she told herself it was good exercise. She even made a rule for herself: no elevators after sunset. Rule number 1, don't take the elevator at night. Rule number 2, don't listen if someone calls your name in the hallway. Rule number 3, always keep the lights on when you sleep. It was silly, she knew, but rules gave her control, and control made her feel safe. Still, she couldn't ignore the feeling that the building didn't like her new routine. One afternoon, she went down to the lobby to collect a parcel. The receptionist, the same young man with the hollow smile, handed her a small cardboard box wrapped in brown tape. "No return address?" she asked. He shook his head. It was left by the elevator. She opened it when she got upstairs. Inside were 3 things: a red thread bracelet, a tiny cracked mirror, and a folded note that said in neat handwriting, "You forgot to pay your respects." Pim's hands trembled. She checked the parcel again. No name, no sender. She threw the items in the trash. But that night, when she took her trash out, she froze. The box was back, placed neatly in front of her door. The red thread tied into a perfect loop. The next morning, Pim ran into a young couple in the lobby. New tenants, just moved into floor 17. They seemed cheerful, relieved to find another person their age in the building. "Do you work from home?" the girl asked. "Yeah," Pim said. Us too. It's so quiet here, it feels like the whole building's empty. It is, Pim said softly. The girl laughed nervously. We tried exploring last night. Every corridor looks the same. We got lost trying to find the pool. Her boyfriend cut in, and we saw something weird on the elevator display. Pim looked up. What? He hesitated. It stopped at 14. Then the doors opened for a second, but it was dark, like an unfinished floor. His girlfriend nudged him. Stop, you'll scare her. He shrugged. Just saying. They waved goodbye. Pim didn't see them again. 2 days later, she noticed a faint, sweet smell in the hallway, like burning incense, the kind used for spirit offerings. When she reached the elevator, she saw a single white flower tucked between the doors, crushed flat. Someone had made an offering there. That night, she dreamed of her mother. In the dream, her mother was sitting cross-legged beside a spirit altar, lighting incense and muttering prayers. Pim, still a child, reached out and touched one of the offerings, a sweet rice cake wrapped in banana leaf. Her mother slapped her hand. You don't touch what isn't for you. If you take what's for them, they'll come to take what's yours. Pim woke up, gasping, drenched in sweat. The smell of incense still hung in the air. She stumbled to the door, opened it, and there, on the floor outside her apartment, lay the same red thread bracelet from the package, neatly coiled, waiting. Her nerves began to unravel. She found herself checking the CCTV app constantly, not just the elevators now, but the corridor feeds too. One afternoon, as she scrolled through the recorded footage, she noticed something strange. At 2:43 a.m., the elevator on her floor opened by itself. No one came out, but a few seconds later, the corridor camera caught movement. Her door. It opened. For 2 full minutes, the door to her apartment stood ajar. Then it closed again. Pim covered her mouth. She hadn't left her bed that night. She was sure of it. She scrolled back again, frame by frame. The door handle moved once more, ever so slightly. And for a split second, the lens caught a reflection in the glass of her window. A child's silhouette, standing perfectly still behind her. By the 5th day, Pim could barely focus on work. She sat in front of her screen for hours, her hands trembling over the keyboard. Her cat Mee would occasionally hiss at empty corners, then dart under the couch. Every time Pim passed the elevator, she felt it watching her. Yes, watching, like something conscious inside its metal walls. She even started hearing a faint tapping from within it when she passed, like knuckles against glass. The other tenants seemed to know something too. They avoided her eyes in the lobby. The woman with the red hair who had once warned her now refused to speak at all. She only smiled tightly, pressed the elevator button, and looked at the floor. Once I overheard 2 cleaners whispering near the service entrance. Another one? Room 1506 this time. Same story? Left the door chained, food still on the table, like they vanished mid-bite. When they noticed her standing there, they went silent. The next morning, Pim woke up to the sound of the elevator dinging repeatedly, over and over, like someone was pressing every button at once. She checked her phone. 3:03 a.m. She opened the app. The elevator lights flickered violently. The camera feed was shaking. Numbers rolled rapidly. 2, 9, 11, 13, and then again 14. She saw it this time. The cabin doors slid open onto a hallway that looked impossibly wrong. The perspective curved, the walls bending inwards like the inside of a throat. And in the corner of the screen, something crouched, pale, long-limbed, its face blurred by motion, but its eyes, black and wet, stared straight into the camera. Then, the feed cut out.
Pim threw her phone across the room. The following day, she decided to leave. She packed a small bag, fed me, and waited until sunrise to call a taxi. But when she pressed the elevator button, the panel didn't light up. The doors opened anyway. Inside, the lights were dead. The air smelled of mildew. For a long time, she just stood there, frozen. The display above the doors flickered with static. Then slowly, the numbers began to change. 13, 14, 15. Pim stepped back. Her heart hammered so loud she could hear it in her ears. She turned to run back toward her apartment, but every hallway she passed looked identical. No door numbers, no markings, just an endless stretch of white-painted walls and dim fluorescent lights. And then, faintly, from behind her, came the sound of bare feet slapping softly against tile. She turned. No one was there. Only the echo of a child's laughter, trailing off into the dark. That night, Pim wrote herself a new rule. Rule number 4. If you hear the elevator at night, don't check the feed. Don't even look at the numbers. Pretend you didn't hear it. She taped the note to her wall, right above her bed. It made her feel safer for one night. But the next morning, when she woke up, the paper was gone. And in its place, scrawled directly onto the wall in faint, childlike handwriting, were 3 words: "Don't look out." The first time Pim heard someone say it aloud, it wasn't a warning, it was a whisper. She was coming back from the lobby after retrieving a grocery delivery. Her arms were full: instant noodles, a carton of eggs, a bottle of soy milk tucked under one elbow. Elevator A arrived with its usual chime. She stepped inside, pressed the button for 18, and leaned back against the wall. The doors slid shut. The lift moved. She watched the numbers blink softly. 4, 7, 10, 12. Then 13. And then 14. Pim's stomach dropped. The elevator slowed. It didn't stop at 15. It stopped at 14. The display dinged. The doors creaked open. There, beyond the threshold, was a dim hallway, narrow, with sickly yellow light, and walls stained with brown watermarks like dried blood. The wallpaper curled at the edges, the floor was unfinished concrete, and at the far end something was swaying. It looked like a mobile, the kind hung above baby cribs, but the shapes weren't stars or animals. They were teeth. Dozens of small white teeth dangling from red thread, spinning slowly. Pim's breath caught in her throat. Then, a voice behind her. "Don't get off on 14. She spun around. The elevator was empty, but the words were still hanging in the air, warm against her skin. She slammed the button for 18 again and again. The doors finally closed, and the elevator shot upward. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the soy milk when she stepped out. It cracked and spilled across the hallway. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop open, scouring forums and message boards for anything about missing floors in Thai apartment complexes. Most results were superstition threads, people sharing old urban legends about floor 13 or haunted staircases. But then, buried 3 pages deep, she found a post on an old Thai paranormal board, a thread titled, "Is there really a hidden floor between 13 and 15? She clicked. The post was 3 years old. It was short, just 1 paragraph. "I stayed in a building in Bangkok where the elevator sometimes stopped at 14 even though the button didn't exist.
One night, I stepped out. Everything was wrong. I walked for what felt like hours, but the hallway never ended. I saw doors, but they didn't lead to rooms, just more hallway. I kept hearing my own voice whispering things I hadn't said. When I turned around to go back, the elevator was gone. The account was deactivated, no replies. Pim bookmarked it anyway. The next evening, as she waited for her kettle to boil, Me started meowing at the door, not scratching, just sitting there, tail twitching, making soft, impatient sounds. "What?" Pim said. "No one's out there." Me meowed louder. Pim cracked the door open. The hallway was empty, but the elevator was open again. No one inside, no button lit, but Me darted forward before she could stop him. "Me!" He ran into the elevator and sat down inside, staring at her. "Come back!" she hissed. "Me!" He didn't move. Then the doors began to close. She lunged, but it was too late. The elevator sealed shut. The display blinked to life. 13, then 14, then the screen went dark. Pim's heart pounded. She pressed the call button. Nothing. She ran down to the lobby, breath ragged, and found the night receptionist watching a soap opera on his tablet. "My cat, it got into the elevator. It's gone to 14. The man looked at her confused. 14? "Yes, it stopped at 14. "There is no floor 14, he said calmly. "I saw it. It skips from 13 to 15. "No, the screen." He raised his hand. "Miss, please. The system doesn't allow it." She pulled out her phone. "I have the feed." But when she opened the app, the playback was corrupted. The elevator's video feed glitched and cut out after floor 13. Nothing. No Me, no 14, nothing. The man's expression hardened. "It's late. You should go upstairs." Pim backed away. As she turned, she glanced toward the lobby shrine. Someone had placed a fresh offering that night. 3 white flowers, a banana, and a small porcelain cat figurine. Me's breed. Same colors, same green eyes. She ran. Back in her apartment, the silence was unbearable. She tried calling the building management hotline. It rang, then dropped. She called noon. No answer. She scrolled through her photos for any images of Me. All of them were there, but in each one, he seemed less sharp. In some, she could swear his eyes looked wrong, glassy, clouded. And in one photo, the last one, taken the day before, he wasn't there at all. Just the couch, as if he had never existed. That night, she sat on her bed, staring at the elevator feed again. She waited. 1:44 a.m., idle. 2:16, still. 2:59, movement. The elevator doors opened. There was no floor number shown this time, just a hallway. A different hallway. Wooden walls, pale light, and at the end of it, a child, standing, facing the wall. The image glitched, then cut. The screen went black. Pim pressed her palm to her chest, trying to steady her breath. She needed to go. She needed to leave the building, to pack her things and get out. But something told her it wouldn't matter, because floor 14 wasn't a floor. It was waiting, and it had already taken something from her. Now it wanted more. The next morning, the cleaning lady on her floor was gone. So was her cart. So was her mop bucket. So was her name tag that used to be taped on the closet door across from Pim's apartment. Just gone. Pim checked with the front desk. "There's no one assigned to floor 18, the receptionist said. "That's not true," Pim insisted. "She cleaned this floor every day. I used to greet her. Her name was Kanya." The receptionist tilted his head. "You must be mistaken." But Pim wasn't. She remembered Kanya's broken English, the way she sang softly while mopping, the pink plastic hair clip shaped like a bow. And just like me, Kanya was being erased. That night, Pim gave in. She walked to the elevator, alone. The lights overhead flickered slightly. She pressed no button. The doors opened. Empty. She stepped inside. The panel didn't light up. She stood still, holding her breath. Then, ding. 13. Then, silence. Then, 14. The doors opened, and for the first time, she stepped out. The air was wrong. It hit Pim the moment she stepped out of the elevator. The temperature dropped, like stepping into a walk-in freezer, but the air wasn't cold. It was damp, wet with the scent of rotting incense, dust, and something sour beneath it all, like stagnant water left to ferment in a sealed jar. She turned. The elevator was still behind her, doors open, no floor number lit, no button panel glowing, just waiting. She took one cautious step forward. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with walls of pale yellow paint that had peeled away in layers, exposing cracked plaster beneath. The floor was bare cement, dusty and uneven. There were doors, yes, but not like the ones upstairs. These were older, wooden, with tarnished brass knobs and hand-carved number plates that didn't match anything in the building's design. They weren't numbered sequentially either. One read 7-4, another 2-9, and one, disturbingly, simply said, "Glapan," go home. She reached out to touch it. The wood was ice cold. Then she noticed something else. There were no cameras, no exit signs, no ceiling speakers piping in gentle music, no signs of life. And yet, she felt watched. Pim walked slowly down the corridor, heart pounding in her ears. The lights above flickered irregularly, like candles gasping for air. Shadows clung to corners, too dark, too deep. She passed the first door. There was something written across the bottom in faded red paint, almost brown now. She crouched to read it, Thai script. A name? No, a prayer. May this soul be untethered from this corridor. Her breath caught. She rose and turned quickly, too quickly, and stumbled. The elevator was gone. Where the doors had been, there was now only a blank wall. Her panic surged. She rushed back, pressed her palms against the surface, felt only cold, unyielding plaster. No, 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 no. She pounded the wall. Let me out! Nothing. Silence. Then, behind her, a creaking sound. A door opening. Very slowly. She turned. It was the door marked 7-4. It stood open just a crack. The darkness beyond it was complete, so black it swallowed the light leaking in from the hallway. And from within that darkness came a sound, a faint click. Then again, and again, like a lighter failing to catch a flame. Click, click, click. Pim backed away. Then, suddenly, another door flung open down the hall, and another, and another. One by one, doors opened silently, some wide, some just a sliver. It was like the building itself was breathing, exhaling all the rooms that had been sealed shut for years. Pim turned and ran. She ran down the hallway, past door after door, until she reached the end and found a mirror. Full length, cracked, warped, and covered in handprints.
It was mounted on the wall like a shrine. At its base sat a small altar. Candles had long since melted into unrecognizable puddles. A bowl of old rice sat covered in mold. And in the center, propped up against a photo frame, was a black and white picture of a man and a child. The same child from the CCTV feed, still facing away, still standing at the end of a hallway. And next to the photo, tied in red thread, was Mi's collar. She staggered back, the image burning itself into her mind. Then, from the mirror, she saw movement. Not her reflection, not anymore. Someone else. A man, tall, thin, dressed in white, standing just behind her. She spun around. Nothing. She looked back into the mirror. Still there. But this time, the man wasn't looking at her. He was looking at himself, his hand pressed against the glass. And slowly, his face began to split into a grin far too wide, as though the mirror warped reality the more he smiled. His eyes met hers, and he whispered, lips moving against the glass, "You shouldn't be here." The mirror cracked down the center. Pim ran. Blindly, without direction, the hallway bent and turned and twisted in ways that didn't make sense. She passed a door that said 15, then one that said 12, then 14A, then Pim. She stopped, turned back. Yes, there it was, a door with her name etched into it, not printed, scratched. Pim. She reached for the knob. It was warm, almost pulsing. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was her apartment. Not a replica. Her apartment. Same layout, same furniture, same tea mug still on the kitchen counter. She stepped in slowly, checking every corner. The lights worked. The air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner. She walked to the couch, sat down. Her phone was even there, charging by the wall. Had she imagined it all? She picked it up. The home screen blinked on, but the date was wrong. December 17th, 2021. Nearly 3 years ago. Her heart pounded. She opened her photo gallery. All the images were old, her hair longer, crit still in them. No me. She opened her email. Unread messages from projects she'd finished long ago. None of this was real. This wasn't the present. This wasn't home. Then she heard it. Soft, distant. Click, click, click. The sound of the faulty lighter. And footsteps getting closer. She turned toward the mirror hanging near her front door. It showed her apartment, but not her. She wasn't there. Instead, it showed the man in white again, walking, smiling, whispering her name. Pim fled the apartment, slammed the door behind her, and ran. She didn't care where. She needed to find the real way out. She passed the cracked mirror again. The collar was gone. Now in its place was a torn Polaroid photo. It showed a woman sitting in an elevator, head tilted back, eyes missing. Beneath it, scrawled in Thai, "She didn't listen. She got off." Further down the corridor, she found a door that looked different, older, wooden, with a brass symbol carved above it, a yantra, sacred geometry used in Thai protection magic. The door was bound shut with red string and sealed with melted wax. Something behind it pounded once, twice, then went still. She didn't open it. She just kept moving. Eventually, she came to a final door. It had no number, no knob, only a smear of black ash across it, and beneath it, scrawled in chalk, "Go home." She reached out. The door creaked open on its own, and beyond it was the elevator, back again, its doors open, waiting. She stepped in slowly, her breath catching in her throat. The panel flickered. No buttons, just a cracked mirror inside. As she stared at her reflection, she saw something strange. A faint image, superimposed behind her, her own body, but thinner, tired, eyes darker. It was still her, but wrong. Her reflection didn't mimic her. It stared back with pity. And then it whispered, "You're not out yet."
There was no sound when the elevator began to move. No hum of machinery, no shifting cables, no familiar mechanical sighs of a descent or ascent. Only silence. And yet, Pim could feel it moving. Not down, not up, just away. The mirror inside the cabin shimmered faintly, as if someone had breathed on the glass from the other side. Her reflection stood perfectly still, eyes wide, lips parted, not matching her own movements. Then, with a slow shudder, the elevator stopped. The doors opened, and the hallway waited for her again. This time, it was different. Longer. The lights above blinked irregularly, some dim, some pulsing softly like fireflies trapped in amber. The ceiling sagged in places. The paint peeled in thick curls like old scabs. But what unsettled her most wasn't the decay. It was the repetition. Every 15 steps, the hallway repeated itself. The same door with the warped number, the same crooked ceiling vent, the same faded children's drawing taped to the wall, crayon scribbles of stick figures holding hands beneath a black sun. She walked past it once, then again, and again. Each time it greeted her with a strange familiarity. Each time the hallway bent just slightly more, its angles warping imperceptibly, like a funhouse mirror she was walking through in slow motion. Eventually, the repetition broke. At the end of the 5th cycle, she saw a new door. Wooden, wide, open. Inside was a room with no furniture. Only a single television set on the floor, the screen glowing static. Pim stepped inside. The screen flickered, then the static resolved into video. Grainy CCTV footage. It showed the lobby of her building. People came and went, delivery riders, tenants. Then, her. She saw herself enter the building, smiling, talking to the receptionist, carrying her moving boxes. Then another clip. Her again, taking the elevator, alone. Another clip, sitting on the couch playing with me, laughing. Then, still. In one video, she was sitting at her desk, not moving, not blinking, just staring. The timestamp read, "Yesterday." The screen cut to black. Then a new clip played. The elevator doors opened. She watched herself step in and never step out. A soft rustling noise came from the far corner of the room. Pim turned. There in the shadows was a mattress on the floor, and on it someone lay still beneath a blanket. She approached slowly. The blanket rose and fell gently, breathing. She crouched, reached out, pulled the cover down. It was her, sleeping, her face peaceful, pale, her wrists wrapped in red thread, and her lips moving, whispering something. Pim leaned closer. The sleeping version of herself murmured, "You have to offer something back." She stumbled out of the room, heart racing. She ran back down the hallway, only to find the path repeating again. The same door, the same ceiling vent, the same drawing. But this time, the stick figures in the crayon drawing were different. One of them was lying on the ground, red lines scribbled across its chest, a small cat drawn beside it, X's for eyes. Pim's stomach turned. She kept moving. The next door she passed had no handle, only a name scratched into it. Kanya. She pressed her ear to it. Faint crying, a woman's voice whispering prayers, soft banging like fists on the wall. Then silence. The air grew colder. Eventually, Pim came to a narrow intersection where the hallway split into two paths. Above each path was a symbol drawn in soot. One looked like an eye, watching, open. The other, a closed mouth, sewn shut. She chose the eye. The corridor narrowed. The floor sloped downward. As she walked, she passed mirrors embedded in the walls. Each one showed her a different version of herself. One crying, one laughing maniacally, one curled into a corner, one holding a baby, one with no face. She passed them all without stopping, until she reached the mirror where her reflection stood upright and waved, not in greeting, in warning, mouthing the words, "Go back." But she didn't, because somewhere ahead, the hallway changed again. She turned a final corner and entered a room. Inside were rows of chairs, old, wooden, mismatched. A shrine stood at the far end. On it, offerings, plastic water bottles, cheap perfume, a pack of instant noodles, a baby doll, its face burned, and a cat's collar, Mies. Next to the shrine, pinned to the wall, were photographs, Polaroids, dozens, all of tenants, some smiling, some caught in mid-blink, some crying, and in every photo, someone else in the background, a pale child facing away. A book lay on a stool before the shrine, an old ledger. Pim opened it. Names, dates, and causes. Room 12-5 disappeared. Room 17-8, elevator opened at 14. Room 15-6, entered mirror. Room 18-7, offer unpaid. Her room. Her number. She turned the page. The last entry had no name, just a scrawled message. The ones who took must give. The door only opens for those who offer. You cannot leave until something takes your place. She looked up. The lights dimmed. The air felt heavier. From behind the shrine, the sound of bare feet, slapping slowly against the concrete, getting closer, and then whispered in her ear, low and cold, "It's your turn." She ran through the chairs, knocking them over, past the shrine, past the hallway, through the repeating corridor, past door after door that now all bore her name. She screamed. No one answered. No one was left. only mirrors and echoes, and the click, click, click of that broken lighter. There is a certain kind of silence that feels sentient. Pim stood in it now. Not a silence born of stillness, but one that seemed to press in around her like a living thing, waiting, listening. She was surrounded by a hallway that had no end, no beginning, no time. A corridor unmoored from the laws of space, the kind of place that existed only in the in-between. She didn't know how long she'd been wandering. There was no sun, no clock, not even the soft hum of electricity. The air was thick, humid, tainted by the sour scent of extinguished incense and old metal. Every time she thought she'd reached a dead end, the walls shifted. Every door she tried either led back to where she had just come from or to empty rooms filled with whispering echoes. Some rooms were hers, some weren't, but all of them remembered her. She passed a mirror mounted crooked on the wall. For a moment she didn't want to look, but something pulled her toward it. Her reflection was dull, eyes sunken, skin pale. Her breath fogged the glass, but her reflection didn't. It simply stared back, still and hollow. Then, behind her in the reflection, someone moved, a shape, tall, silent, dressed in saffron robes. Pim turned. There stood an old monk, his back to her, his head bowed, his bare feet dark with soot. His robe hung loose around his thin frame, and in his hand he held a small metal bowl, the kind used in morning alms. A broken spirit mirror dangled from a red thread around his neck. He said nothing. Pim took a trembling step forward. "Please," she said, "I just want to go home." The monk didn't turn. Instead, he slowly knelt beside a faded drawing on the wall, a mandala drawn in charcoal and blood, its edges blurred and smudged. He placed the alms bowl at the center. Then finally, he spoke. His voice was soft, barely above a breath. "You stepped out before you understood." "Understood what?" "The contract." He motioned around the corridor. "This floor is a wound, a scar in the spirit world. It remembers what was buried beneath it." "I didn't do anything. I just moved in. I didn't—" "You took what was given," he interrupted, still not looking at her. "A room, a home, a space cleansed with no ritual, protected by no offering. I didn't know. You didn't ask." The silence returned deeper now, almost accusatory. Pim whispered, "Then tell me how to leave." The monk turned. His eyes were white, clouded like glass. Around his mouth, ash stains formed the faint outline of lips that had once repeated many chants over many years. He held out the broken spirit mirror. "You must offer what was taken, return balance, or remain here until your name is forgotten." She hesitated. "What was taken?" The monk tilted his head. "Your cat, your cleaner, the neighbors, all given, but never acknowledged, never honored." "I didn't know they were gone." "Exactly." He closed her fingers around the mirror. "Go, find what you still remember. Give it back." She left him and wandered again, the mirror clutched tightly in her hand. It was warm, as if recently held by someone else. The red thread looped around her wrist, tightening slightly with each step. She passed more doors. Some had names, some had scratches, some had no handles. But one door, one, stood open. Inside was a small room filled with stacked trays of burnt offerings, old bananas, stale rice, cracked eggshells, melted candles, a shrine in disarray. She stepped inside and placed the spirit mirror on the floor. Nothing happened. Then she heard it, footsteps behind her. But when she turned, it wasn't the monk. It was herself, a younger version, college-aged. No shadows beneath her eyes, hair longer, shoulders not yet weighed down by the years. The younger Pim didn't look at her. She walked past her, knelt before the offerings, lit an invisible candle with an invisible flame, whispered a prayer Pim hadn't spoken since childhood. It echoed through the room. To the unseen, to the forgotten, to the spirits that guard the thresholds, accept what is yours. Pim fell to her knees, and for the first time, she whispered it too. The walls around her trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. A gust of wind blew through the sealed room, though there were no windows. The shrine flickered with a brief, impossible flame. The door closed behind her, and when it opened again, she was back in the hallway. But it was different. The lights were steadier, the air less heavy. She walked to the next corner, and there, in the middle of the corridor, was me, sitting, calm, waiting. Tears welled in her eyes. Me! She reached for him. He stood, stretched, walked away, down the corridor, turning the corner, leading her. She followed him, past rooms that now looked more real, less decayed, past a door that once read Kanya, but now was labeled storage, past mirrors that showed her reflection again, matching her movements. Me paused before a final door, one she hadn't seen before. It bore no name, only a symbol carved into the wood, a closed eye. She reached out, turned the knob. Inside was a small room, empty except for a single round floor cushion, and on that cushion sat her grandmother. Eyes closed, hands in her lap, breathing, slowly, deeply. Pim couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her grandmother's eyes opened. "Child," she said softly, "you still don't understand." "I offered something," Pim said. You nodded. "Yes, but you haven't paid the price." "What price?" "The same one every spirit demands." Silence hung heavy between them. Her grandmother leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Memory." The room faded, melted, folded in on itself like origami soaked in rain. She stood again in the elevator, alone, but this time the panel glowed. G. Ground floor. She pressed it. The doors closed, the lights dimmed, and she descended. When the elevator opened, she stepped out into the familiar lobby. The concierge desk was empty. The lobby shrine was clean, a new garland of marigolds draped around its frame. The glass doors were open. Beyond them, daylight. Real, blinding daylight. She stepped outside. But as the sun warmed her face, Pim stopped. Her phone buzzed. One notification. "Me has been missing for 6 days. Do you still want to keep searching?" She opened her camera app. Her reflection stared back. But she didn't remember taking this photo. She didn't remember anything after what? Her mind ached. Her body felt tired. She looked up. The building loomed behind her. Tall, silent, glass panels gleaming like teeth. She turned away, walked down the street, and as she disappeared into the crowd, the glass doors of the lobby slid closed behind her, and the elevator hummed softly once more.
Pim thought she had escaped. For 3 days, she didn't speak about it. Not to Noon, not to her mother, not even to herself. She packed what she could carry and moved into a temporary guest house on the other side of Bangkok. It was noisy there, real noise. Honking cars, street vendors, children laughing in the alleyway. She welcomed it like sunlight after a long fever. But the silence still found her. It followed her into her dreams. It waited behind her reflection, and it whispered to her each night, long after the city went to sleep. The voice of the monk. You must offer what was taken. On the 4th morning, Pim woke to find a parcel sitting outside her new room. No knock, no message, just a brown box. No return label, no name. Her hands shook as she picked it up. Inside, a burnt stick of incense, a slip of paper with her old apartment number, 18-7, written in charcoal, and wrapped in tissue, tied with red thread, the broken spirit mirror she had left behind. It had returned. It always returned. She slammed the lid shut. She told herself it wasn't real. But the next night, her phone rang at 3:33 a.m. No caller ID. She didn't answer. It rang again, and again, and again, until she finally answered, breath tight in her chest. All she heard was a sound, a faint click, 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 like someone striking a lighter in a dark, wet room. Then a voice, distorted but familiar, her own. Come back, you forgot the altar. Pim returned to the building before sunrise. She didn't know what she was hoping for. Maybe closure, maybe a second chance. The security guard was asleep at the desk. The lobby lights flickered faintly. No one stopped her as she walked to elevator A and pressed her palm to the scanner. The doors opened. The panel lit. No buttons, no floor numbers. Just a mirror inside, cracked at the center. It was waiting. She stepped in. The doors closed, and she descended into the in-between. This time, floor 14 greeted her not with shadows, but with stillness. The air was warmer now. The smell of burnt offerings filled the corridor. Sweetened coconut, dried jasmine, mold. She walked slowly, no fear this time, only purpose. At the end of the corridor stood a door she hadn't seen before, wooden, carved, blackened by fire. The frame was wrapped in old monk's robes, stained with ash. She pushed it open. Inside was the altar. It stood at the center of a room with no walls, only darkness. The altar was crude, built from salvaged wood and rusted nails,
surrounded by melted wax and shattered ceramic cups. But what struck her most was the arrangement. It was backward. Photos faced the wall. Incense sticks burned upside down. Offerings were placed with the labels torn off, faces scratched out, names removed. The candles flickered with a flame that glowed a sickly green, and at the very top sat a mirror, split in two, reflecting nothing but void. This was not a shrine of worship. It was a shrine of forgetting, a place to bury memory, to erase presence, to silence the ones no longer seen. Pim stepped forward. The air shifted. Something was behind her. She turned and saw them, the missing. Kanya, the cleaner, her mop still clutched in one hand. The young couple from 17, pale, holding hands, eyes hollow. The man from the photo, the one smiling too wide. A child, barefoot, arms dangling at his sides. And behind them 100 more, faces blurred, mouths sewn shut, each holding a piece of themselves, a key, a phone, a name tag, a collar, a prayer. All of them bound by red thread, all of them forgotten, all of them watching. And yet none of them looked at her, only through her, because she was already fading. The monk's voice returned, this time from within the walls. This is the altar the world built when it stopped believing, when it stopped honoring, when it stopped seeing. The shadows around her pulsed. You must offer the altar whole, or you will become part of it. Pim stepped closer. She knelt before the altar, pulled the mirror from her pocket, cracked, streaked with ash. She placed it at the center, and she whispered, "I see you." The candles flared, the incense ignited in reverse, the smoke coiling down into the sticks instead of rising. The photos turned on their own, revealing the faces that had once been hidden. And the spirits behind her gasped, a sound like hundreds of lungs remembering breath. One by one, they began to disappear. Not vanish, not dissolve, just let go. Released. Names whispered like wind through rice fields. She wept. She didn't know why, only that some part of her had always known this moment would come, that some part of her had always been missing. When the room emptied, she stood. The mirror no longer reflected nothing. It showed her, just her, tired but whole. And in its corner, me, curled up, sleeping. She turned to leave. The door behind her was gone. But the corridor was there again. Only now it led to light, and far ahead at the end stood an elevator. The panel lit, the doors open, waiting. She walked toward it, and as she did, she whispered a prayer. Not for herself, but for the next person, the one who wouldn't know, the one who would forget, the one who would need to remember what it meant to bow, to light a candle, to say a name, to see.
The air was heavy with memory. Not scent, not sound, but something older,
something that clung to the skin like ash, that seeped into the lungs like smoke long after the flame had gone out. As Pim stepped out of the elevator, again, it was not into the twisted corridors of floor 14, but somewhere deeper, somewhere beneath it. The walls were not concrete anymore. They were soil, black, compact, and slick with age. She was underground. A tunnel? A chamber? It didn't matter. The space breathed, and it remembered. Her footsteps echoed softly against packed earth. Above her, tiny roots dangled like veins. The air smelled of old incense, rain-soaked wood, and the unmistakable tang of rusted metal. But deeper than that, beneath every breath, there was something human, like blood that had soaked the dirt and never dried. She moved forward. The ground sloped downward. On the wall, symbols began to appear, scratched into the dirt with bone or stick. Spirals, eyes, broken yantras, prayers half erased, and names. So many names. Some in Thai, some in Khmer, some in languages she didn't recognize. Some that had no letters at all, just marks that screamed. Then she reached it, the root of it all. The chamber opened like a hollowed lung. At the center, an altar carved directly into the earth. No offerings, no candles, just rows of skulls stacked neatly like bricks. Behind them, embedded into the mud, were shards of shattered mirrors, glinting faintly even in the darkness. Pim stepped closer. This wasn't an altar of worship. It was a seal, and it had been broken. She knelt, brushing dust away from the base of the altar. There, carved deep and rough, were the outlines of 3 amulets, once placed to protect, now missing. She didn't need to guess what had happened. Someone had removed them. Someone had desecrated this place to build something else. "You already live on what was buried," the monk's voice echoed faintly in her mind. She closed her eyes, and she saw it, not as a dream, but as a memory given to her. The land was once sacred, a spirit ground, tended by a lineage of monks from a forest temple that no longer stood. They had performed rites here, not to invite gods, but to contain the forgotten dead. Spirits too angry to ascend. Spirits bound by betrayal, starvation, unfinished prayers. The monks built this altar as a seal, not to honor, but to hold. A boundary between the living and what should never rise. But decades later, when the city expanded, the land was sold. No one remembered. No one was told. The shrine was bulldozed, the amulets removed, and the glass tower rose, without ritual, without remorse. And so, floor 14 was born. Not a floor, a wound. A purgatory built in the exact space where the spirits had once been trapped, now loosed, now hungry. Pim gasped. The vision vanished. She was back in the chamber. And she understood. Her building wasn't haunted. It was possessed, occupied by spirits not just seeking vengeance, but seeking space. A corridor for the erased, a floor for the uninvited, an address for the forgotten. She looked again at the missing amulet slots. 3 holes, 3 names. And then she remembered the broken things that had returned to her over and over again. The spirit mirror, the red thread, the incense stick.
items left in offering but never used. She pulled them from her pocket, laid them gently into the 3 empty spaces. The ground shifted, a sound like breath after drowning, and then she bled. A small line across her palm, unseen, unforced, but necessary. The blood dripped onto the offering, and the altar accepted it. The mirrors around the chamber pulsed, each shard lit with a different image. A tenant brushing their teeth, a child chasing a toy down the hallway, Kanya mopping the floor with her soft humming, the young couple dancing in their apartment. Every image, vivid, alive, remembered. Then the mirrors cracked, quietly, like ice. One by one they fell into the soil, vanishing, sealed, returned. And the chamber grew still, not empty, but at peace. Pim stood. The tunnel behind her now glowed faintly, lit by lanterns that hadn't been there before. She walked slowly, fingers brushing the earthen wall, feeling its pulse subside. As she reached the end, she found a small wooden sign nailed crookedly into the earth. Carved into it, "It is never the spirits who forget us. It is we who forget them." She nodded once and stepped into the light. The elevator waited again, its doors open, the panel glowing with a familiar number. 18. She stepped inside. This time, there was no cracked mirror, only her reflection, whole, tired, but whole. The doors slid shut, and for the first time, there was no sound. Only stillness, the kind that came after the storm.
The building looked the same. Outside, its glass walls reflected the Bangkok skyline, steel, blue, proud. The concierge desk was back to its usual routines. Someone had even repainted the hallway baseboards. Fresh flowers sat at the lobby altar, wilting gently by noon each day. To any newcomer, it looked like a perfect place to start again. And for some chai, it was. A fresh job, a new promotion, a well-deserved upgrade from his old peeling studio. The real estate agent had shown him Unit 18-7 like it was a prize wrapped in glass and brushed metal. "It was empty for a while," she said, smiling, "but it's quiet, private, no complaints." He had nodded without asking why. He liked the quiet. He liked being alone. At least, that's what he told himself. The first few nights passed without incident. Somchai unpacked, arranged his sparse belongings, and threw away the blessing garland the moving company had left on the doorknob. He didn't believe in that stuff. He did everything by routine. Wake at 6, gym by 6:30, shower, office by 8:30. But on the 4th night, the elevator stopped at 14. He didn't press the button. It just did. The panel blinked. 14. The elevator paused for a heartbeat, then kept moving. He told himself it was a glitch. Still, when he stepped into his unit, he checked the hallway behind him. Empty, but the light by the elevator was flickering. That night, he dreamed of a woman. She was standing in his bathroom, her face blurry in the mirror. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, as if waiting for him to see her. When he woke, the mirror was fogged, but he hadn't used hot water. The dreams kept coming,
Sometimes she was in the kitchen, slicing vegetables that never made a sound. Sometimes she stood at the foot of his bed, holding a red thread that trailed off into the hallway. Each time he asked her who she was, each time she said nothing. But in the last dream, she whispered something, soft, close to his ear. "Don't get off." Somchai checked the elevator feed the next morning out of curiosity. The building's app showed recent movements. At 3:17 a.m., elevator A had descended from floor 18 to floor 14. The video feed was blank, no data available. He asked the concierge if the building had a maintenance log. The man smiled politely. "Everything is normal." He insisted. "The elevator stopped at 14. There is no 14. I saw it. You imagined it." The smile never left his face. And Somchai realized something strange. He couldn't remember the concierge's name. Later that week, Somchai met his neighbor in the hallway, an older woman with sharp eyes and a face carved by decades of Bangkok heat. "Don't stay too long," she said, unprompted. He frowned. "Why?" She didn't answer. She just looked at his unit door and then walked away. That night, the elevator opened on its own. Somchai had just stepped into the hallway to toss his trash when it dinged behind him. The cabin was empty, but the floor number above the door flashed, 14. He stared. The lights inside were dim. The back wall looked longer than usual. A corridor stretched beyond it. Not a room, not a floor, but a space that shouldn't exist. Then, for a moment, he saw her, the woman from his dreams, standing in the back, watching him. Not angry, not sad, just present. Like someone who used to live there, like someone who still did. He ran back inside, locked his door, left the lights on all night, didn't sleep. And yet, at 3:33 a.m., his phone vibrated. No number, one message. She's still waiting. The next day, he found a letter in his mailbox. No name, no return address, just a single sentence written in red ink. "Don't forget the ones who vanished." Inside the envelope was a photograph, faded, of the very apartment he now lived in. Only it looked different, older, lived in. A woman stood at the window, black shirt, eyes hollow, back straight. A cat sat curled beside her feet. Somchai turned the photo over. One word scrawled on the back: Pim. He began digging. The building's archives were hard to access. Management claimed all tenants' data older than 2 years had been deleted for privacy. But on a forgotten real estate forum, he found a post from 2021, a thread titled "Strange Floor in Luxury Condo, Disappeared Tenant." The post contained only one image, a CCTV still, Elevator A, the timestamp, 3:17 a.m. Inside the cabin, a woman, standing alone, red thread tied around her waist. Caption: "She got off. We never saw her again." That night, Somchai returned home and found the apartment darker than usual. The lights worked, but the shadows felt thicker. He walked past the bathroom mirror,
and saw something scrawled in steam across the glass, though the air was cold. 4 words: "Don't follow her in." He stared at the mirror, and for a split second, his reflection blinked, but he didn't. He didn't sleep. He watched the elevator feed all night. At 3:14 a.m., the cabin moved, no call button pressed. It stopped. Floor 14. The camera glitched, and in the final frame before it cut, he saw himself standing inside, eyes blank, red thread looped around his neck. Somchai never went missing, not officially. He stopped going to work. His rent auto-deducted for 6 months. His lights stayed on. Packages sat outside his door for days, then weeks. Eventually, a notice was posted: eviction. The unit returned to the market. 18-7. Quiet, private, no complaints. And behind the mirrored wall of elevator A, a woman watches, still, patient, remembered. And in every elevator, in every city, in every building that rises without prayer, a ghost waits.
It had been weeks, or days, or maybe only hours. Pim no longer knew. Time inside the space between had become a trick mirror, stretching, bending, folding in on itself. She couldn't remember the last time she saw the sun, or heard a real voice, or touched something that was truly warm. She moved through the corridors like a shadow now, floating through repeated doors, familiar echoes, warped reflections. She wasn't sure if she was alive, only that she was still here, still inside floor 14. The strange part wasn't the walls that shifted or the lights that flickered. It was the memories that began to fade. At first, it was small things: her phone passcode, the name of her childhood school, the taste of her favorite drink. Then, Mi's voice, the way he used to paw at her door. Gone. Then, the last message Noon had sent her. She knew it had once made her smile, but now she couldn't even remember the sound of her own laughter. Everything was softening, thinning, like paint left too long in the rain. And she was afraid that soon she would forget who she was. She began hearing knocking from the walls, not aggressive, not urgent, just persistent, a rhythm, like a heartbeat. Knock, 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 always in sets of 3. She followed the sound until she reached a door she had never seen before, or maybe had seen 1,000 times. It bore no number, just a handprint smeared in soot. She reached for the handle. It turned easily. Inside, the room was cold, dim, airless. And in the center, a man hung from the ceiling, upside down, tied by red thread around his ankles. His eyes were open, mouth agape in a silent scream. Beneath him, a small phone buzzed endlessly. She stepped closer. The screen showed a voicemail. She tapped it, and her own voice played. "Please, I'm still here. I don't know how to get out." Her breath caught in her throat. The man above twitched. His lips moved, but the sound that came out was her voice on loop. Her messages, the ones she had tried to send, the ones no one answered. And suddenly she understood. The man wasn't a stranger. He was a mirror, a vessel, a soul that had once tried to leave something behind and was now forced to replay it forever. She fled the room, stumbling into the hallway. The door closed behind her with a soft, echoing click. She turned to look. The handprint was gone. Now her own name was scratched into the door. Pym. The corridors began to change again. This time they led her back to a version of her apartment. Same furniture, same desk, same mug still on the counter. She stepped inside. It felt too quiet. She opened the laptop. It flickered to life. Dozens of files lined the desktop. All videos, all labeled with dates. She clicked one. It showed her, sitting on the bed, staring, unmoving. Hours passed in the recording. She never blinked. Another file. Same thing. Another. Different dates, different clothes, but always the same posture. Still, silent, empty. She checked the timestamps. Some were from last week, some from last year, some from next year. Then she found one labeled Today. She opened it and saw herself, right now, standing at the desk, staring into the screen, and behind her, the monk, standing still, holding something in his hands. She spun around, but the room was empty. Only the silence remained, and the soft hum of the laptop fan. A voice whispered, "All doors close unless you give something sacred." She didn't know where it came from or if it was even spoken out loud, but she knew what it meant. She had given memory. She had given breath. She had given pieces of herself, but never anything sacred. Never her name. Never her truth. She walked to the mirror. Her reflection looked back, but it wasn't her anymore. Not fully. The edges were fading, hair graying, eyes dull. Name? Forgotten. She touched the glass and whispered it. "My name is Pym. I lived, I disappeared, I remember." The mirror cracked, then pulsed, and for the first time, she saw everything. She saw the girl from 17, curled in her bathtub, red thread wrapped around her wrist. She saw Kanya, still pushing her mop, her feet hovering over the floor. She saw Sumchai, standing in the elevator, pressing buttons that didn't exist. And she saw herself, as a child, watching her grandmother pour water onto the ground, whispering names of ancestors she never met. She saw the rituals, the altars, the offerings, and how they stopped, how silence replaced them, how forgetting became a way of life, and how that silence demanded balance. She woke on the floor. The lights in the hallway were flickering again. A soft ding echoed nearby. The elevator. Oten. Waiting. She rose slowly, walked toward it. Her reflection stared at her from inside, whole, still scared, but no longer fading. The panel showed no number, just a single word: home. She stepped in. The doors closed, and in the distance, she heard it. A final sound, soft, definitive. The sound of doors closing. The red thread had always been there, sometimes around her wrist, sometimes in her dreams. sometimes trailing across the floor like a dropped ribbon no one remembered tying. But now, for the first time, Pim followed it. It unspooled from the elevator, slipping between her fingers like breath, down the corridor, around corners that didn't exist yesterday, through doors that shouldn't open, across tiles that echoed like hollow bone. Wherever it went, the lights dimmed. Wherever it touched, the air changed, like something sacred passing through a space that had forgotten what sacred felt like. She didn't ask where it led. She just walked. And behind her, shadows followed. She began to see them again. Not faces, not figures, but steps. Footprints formed in the dust ahead of her, barefoot and small, then larger ones, then dozens, all moving in the same direction. She realized they were returning. All of them. The forgotten, the missing, the ones who had vanished without ritual. They were being called back, not to haunt, but to be seen, to be named, to be released. The thread led her to a room at the end of a long, breathing hallway. It was a shrine, not like the others. No candles, no incense, just a cracked floor where light pooled from nowhere. At its center, a mirror, full length, old, covered in names, not etched, scratched like claw marks, some in Thai, some in other scripts, some too faint to read, but they pulsed, as if waiting. Pim stepped forward. Her name wasn't there yet, but she knew it would be, unless she did something now. From her pocket, she pulled the last thing she carried. A spool of red thread, a broken incense stick, the tiny collar Me once wore, a torn Polaroid she didn't remember taking of herself in the elevator, smiling faintly. And finally, the spirit mirror the monk had returned to her, now fully cracked. She placed them gently at the base of the shrine, then sat, cross-legged, palms open, just like her grandmother had taught her once upon a childhood she could barely remember. And she began to speak, not a chant, not a ritual from a book, just words, honest words. To the ones who were never named, to the ones who walked these halls in silence, to the ones who disappeared with the lights still on, I see you. And if no one else will remember, I will. If no one else will light the incense, I will. If no one else will speak your names, I will. The air changed. The shadows thickened around her, then stepped forward, one by one. People she'd seen in the CCTV clips, faces from the photos, eyes that had watched her from behind mirrors. They stood in a silent circle, not reaching out, just standing, together, waiting. And in the center of the mirror, the crack began to glow, faintly, then brighter, then blinding. The light swallowed the room, and when it faded, she was back, not in the hallway, not in the shrine, not in any place she could name, but standing before the monk once more. His robes were torn, his eyes clearer now, no longer white and fogged, but full of deep sadness. She didn't speak. She waited. He bowed his head. You gave what no one else would, witness. He stepped aside, and behind him a door appeared. Simple, wooden, old, but familiar, like the door of her grandmother's house, the place she hadn't seen in decades. It swung open slowly. Inside, a narrow corridor, and at the end, me, sitting, tail flicking, eyes bright, waiting. She stepped forward, but the monk's voice stopped her. You must choose. She turned. His voice was steady. If you pass through, your name returns, your memories return, you return. But the floor remains for the next, for the ones who will forget. She nodded. I understand. He held out the red thread. She tied it gently around her wrist and stepped into the light. The door closed behind her, softly, completely. And from the other side, the shadows faded. The names on the mirror vanished, all except one. Hers. Not scratched, not screamed, just written, clearly. Pim. The hallway held its breath, then let it go, and the red thread turned to ash. The sound was soft, just a ding, but in that moment it was everything. Pim opened her eyes. She was standing in the corridor outside her old apartment, 1807. The lights overhead were steady now. The air still carried that faint trace of jasmine from the lobby shrine. Somewhere far below, a taxi honked. A microwave chimed behind a neighbor's door. The building was alive, and yet she wasn't sure if she truly belonged here anymore. The elevator in front of her was open, empty, still, waiting. She stepped inside, heart steady. The control panel had changed. No buttons, just a mirror across the back wall, whole, untouched. The reflection looking back at her was herself, but softer, quieter, as if someone had dusted off a version of her that had once been lost in corners of grief and forgetting. She stood there, unmoving, as the elevator descended. No lights blinked, no floor numbers flashed, only the slow, silent drift downward, like falling through water. And then, a voice. Her own. Not from the elevator, from the mirror. You forgot who prayed for you. She blinked, and the reflection changed. Now it showed her as a child, 8 years old, sitting beside her grandmother at a family altar, watching her pour water into a small bowl, whispering names into the air as if they were still listening. Her grandmother's voice echoed, "We speak their names so they don't wander. We give offerings so they don't starve. We light candles so they don't wait in the dark." The child version of Pim turned toward the mirror and smiled. The elevator slowed, then stopped. The doors opened, but it wasn't the lobby. It wasn't floor 14 either. It was somewhere else. A corridor, but not of this world. The floor was made of woven grass mats. Candles flickered along the walls. Prayers were etched into the wood beams in languages she couldn't read but somehow understood. It felt like a memory, the kind passed down through stories and smoke. At the far end of the corridor, a small doorway stood open. Golden light spilled through it, warm and alive. Pim stepped out.
Inside was a single room, familiar and impossible, a place that reminded her of all the homes she'd ever lived in, combined into one. The color of her childhood bedroom, the shape of her university dorm, the scent of her mother's hair. On a low table in the center sat an unlit candle, and beside it a piece of parchment. She picked it up. It read, "To leave this place, one must carry only what is true." She sat cross-legged on the mat, closed her eyes, and breathed. She thought of what was true, that she had lived alone, that she had tried to disappear, that she thought no one noticed when she faded, that she feared silence, that she forgot to remember. She thought of me, of the people who went missing, of the ones who were never named. She thought of the thread, the mirrors, the monk, the girl in the elevator, the footsteps in the hallway. And then she remembered her own name. Not just Pim, but who Pim was before the forgetting began, before silence wrapped her like gauze, before she vanished between the floors of a world that stopped praying. When she opened her eyes, the candle was lit, its flame steady, gentle, and the parchment now bore a second line, "You may go." She stood. The door opened again, and beyond it, a field, open, golden, endless. But as she stepped toward it, the elevator chimed one last time behind her. She turned. Inside stood the monk. He bowed once. "The wound is sealed, but the memory must remain." She nodded. "I won't forget." She took a last look at the corridor behind her. It had begun to fade, but the echo of footsteps still lingered, not in fear, in remembrance. And as she stepped into the field, the elevator disappeared, quietly, completely. In the building far above, in the world of the living, someone pressed the button for the elevator. The doors opened. No strange floor appeared, no glitch in the panel. Just clean metal, soft light, the scent of jasmine. And on the mirror, for only a moment, a faint reflection of a woman, smiling gently, before fading into the glass.
For a while, there was peace. Real, gentle peace. Pim lived in a quiet place far from the tower, near a sleepy canal where fishermen rose with the mist. Her days were simple: morning rice, afternoon walks, evening tea. She no longer checked elevator panels, no longer scanned mirrors for shadows, no longer jolted awake at 3:33 a.m. She watered her plants, lit incense for no one in particular, and sometimes, just to feel something old, she tied a red thread around her wrist before bed. She was whole again. But the peace never stays, not in places touched by forgetting. It began with a smell, one she hadn't sensed in months. Melted wax, soot, old incense burned too low. She lit a candle to chase it away, but the smell remained. Then the dreams returned, not of herself, but of others. She saw a boy, no more than 10, stepping into an elevator after school. The panel blinked. 13, 14. He never stepped out. She saw a woman in her 50s, tired from work, pressing the button for her floor. The elevator opened onto darkness. She hesitated, then walked in anyway. She saw a delivery rider holding a bag of noodles. The doors closed behind him. The feed blinked out. No one asked where he went.
Night after night, the dreams grew stronger, more vivid, and Pim realized the floor still existed. Maybe not in that building, maybe not even in Bangkok, but somewhere, anywhere people forgot to look, forgot to bow, forgot to speak the names aloud, the wound reopened. One morning she woke to find a package outside her door. No name, just a red string tied neatly around a brown box. Inside, 3 items: a tiny mirror, a stick of incense, and a photograph of a new building still under construction. Behind it, scribbled in pen, "They're building without blessing again. They never learn." She sat in silence for a long time, then lit the incense, not to summon anything, but to bear witness. She whispered names she didn't know, just in case someone had once carried them. She placed the mirror on her altar and tied the red thread tighter around her wrist. That evening she walked to town. The sun was setting low, casting long shadows across the dirt road. She passed a boy kicking a ball, a mother washing fruit, an old man smoking by the river. All of them alive, all of them unaware. Behind them, on a distant hill, a new tower was rising, steel bones against the sky. No altar at the base, no garlands tied to scaffolding, no monks chanting blessings, just concrete and ambition. That night, Pim couldn't sleep. She stood in front of her mirror and saw a flicker of movement behind her. Not fear, just recognition. She turned slowly. The room was empty, but in the reflection, a small offering bowl now sat on her windowsill. Inside, a coin, a flower petal, and a folded note. She opened the paper. Only one sentence written: "Offerings must be witnessed." She understood then. Memory was not enough. Naming was not enough. Someone must see. Someone must speak. Someone must stand in the place where others would turn away. And that person, this time, was her. She packed lightly. A bag of candles, a spool of tread, an old photo of me, and the mirror, the first one she was ever given, cracked and repaired. She walked toward the city, not because she was called, but because she chose to go. She arrived at the construction site before dawn. It was quiet, steel bones casting long, tired shadows. She walked the perimeter. No spirit house, no shrine, no thread, no incense, only open ground. And that was all the spirits ever needed. She lit a candle on the edge of the site, planted the mirror in the dirt, and tied red thread between 2 rusted poles, forming a makeshift altar. Not elaborate, not grand, just witnessed, just seen. And as the sun rose, Pim whispered into the wind, "I see you. I remember you. I will not let you be erased." Behind her, the air shifted. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. She knew they were watching. The ones waiting for names. The ones left behind in elevators. The ones whose footsteps echoed in silent halls. She was no longer afraid of them, because she knew the truth now. They didn't want revenge. They wanted remembrance. And someone, anyone, who would stay long enough to say, "You were real. You were here. And you mattered." The wind lifted the thread. The candle flickered. The mirror caught the first light of morning, and in that reflection, Pim saw a line of people behind her, all waiting, all holding offerings, all bearing names.
It was never about the ghosts. Not really. Pim understood that now. The whispers in the hallway, the lights that flickered, the floors that blinked into existence between numbers, the eyes that stared from mirrors long after she'd turned away. They weren't hauntings. They were reminders, echoes of things we choose not to see, because it's easier that way. Easier to ignore than to name. Easier to seal the wall than to build the shrine. Easier to design 24 floors of steel and glass than to bow, light incense, and ask permission. But spirits never forget, and neither does a floor that was never meant to exist. Pim sat in the center of her quiet apartment, surrounded by notes, threads, offerings. The apartment wasn't really hers anymore. She hadn't lived there in months. But something had brought her back. A pull, a whisper. Maybe memory, maybe guilt, maybe both. She sat cross-legged on the floor, the same way her grandmother once did. A small altar stood in front of her, simple, temporary, made of her hands and a prayer. Her phone was open beside her. The building's elevator feed played softly on the screen. She watched in silence as the doors opened again. Floor 13, then 14. No one stepped in. No one stepped out. Just that space, always waiting. She began to write. Not a ritual, not a report. A story for those who would come after. A record, a warning, a way in or out, depending on how they chose to read it. She typed each word carefully, as if they carried weight, because they did. Every name she remembered she typed, every step, every dream, every door that should never have opened, every voice that whispered her back from forgetting. At the top of the document she wrote the title, "The Floor That Wasn't There. Read Before You Move In." Then she uploaded it into the building's maintenance archive, hidden but reachable, waiting for the curious. She stood, wrapped the red thread once more around her wrist, not as a tether, but as a vow. She didn't know how long the building would remain quiet. She didn't know where floor 14 would appear next, but she knew this: it would come again. Not out of vengeance, but because the world kept building on broken ground, because silence had replaced ritual, because memory had grown inconvenient, and forgetting had become a kind of design choice. She walked to the elevator one last time, pressed the call button. Ding! The doors opened, empty, clean, still. She stepped inside. No floor numbers glitched, no mirror cracked, just her reflection, steady, aware, whole. But as the doors began to close, she reached out, pressed the emergency stop, and whispered into the space, "Not today." Somewhere beneath the foundation, in soil packed with forgotten prayers and broken seals, a candle flickered. A thread untied itself. A name was spoken, and a door quietly closed. In another building, across the river, an architect reviewed final floor plans. One assistant asked, "Should we skip 13 again?"
The architect waved the question away. No one believes in that stuff anymore. They didn't see the intern flinch. They didn't notice how she rubbed the red thread tied around her wrist. They didn't hear her whisper under her breath, "Then we build on forgetting." In Bangkok, in Tokyo, in Jakarta, in Kuala Lumpur, the buildings rise, steel climbs, concrete settles, glass gleams. But underneath them all, something waits, not with teeth, not with claws, but with memory, with names, with quiet, unlit corridors, and an elevator that sometimes stops where no floor should be. Because floor 14 doesn't exist until you forget that it should.